Cargo ships these days have a pretty minimal crew. Most ships only have a crew of about 20. And that crew can consist of a captain, a chief mate, second, third mate, chief engineer, first engineer, second engineer, third engineer, a steward, a cook, an SA, maybe a cadet. But most ships have 6 deckhands, making up more than 25% of the crew. So let's take a look at why there's so many of these deckhands on board and what it is they actually do. Welcome. My name is Joe Franza. Welcome to the channel. This channel is all about working and living on modern cargo ships. So if you're interested in something like that, please be sure to subscribe. That really helps the channel. You know, these days when people think of the guys handling the lines, working out on deck, I'm sure they think of terms like seafarer or deckhand or decky. But these days in the industry, they're referred to as an AB, or an able-bodied seaman. An able-bodied seaman, also known as an abled seaman, is a deckhand with specific skills and experience who is a member of the deck department on a merchant ship. What's your first name, Mike? At least that's what the internet says. But I think there's a little more to the AB than that, despite what some captains may say. You know, I've been sailing for over 8 years, and I've been on 13 different types of ships. And I can confidently say I've done most of the jobs the AB has to do, from the common to the not so common. So the jobs of the deckhand can be broken down into a couple different categories. You have standing a watch, maintenance, steering, mooring operations, cargo operations, crane operations, and Marlin spike seamanship. All right, let's take a closer look at these jobs. Okay, first up, standing a watch. There are several different types of watches on a ship, but probably the most common is bridge watch. While you're on bridge watch, you're essentially the eyes for the mate. You're just another tool for him to use, looking for contacts or anything of importance on the horizon. Another very common watch is gangway watch. So when a ship is tied up, the gangway is the only way for people to come on and off the ship. And it's the AB's job to be more or less the bouncer for the ship, keeping a log of everyone who's coming on, checking IDs, searching bags. You're the first line of defense for the ship. Anchor watch is probably my favorite watch. The best part about anchor watch is you're not restricted to one area. You're pretty much on patrol of the entire ship. But your primary duty is to report the status of the anchor chain.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, anchor chain's still up and down.
Up and down, roger.
Every ship is different, but usually you report the status of the anchor chain every hour. When a ship goes down a shipping channel, usually there's an AB on the bow. In case of emergency, if we have to deploy the anchors, they can do that. But otherwise, they're calling out small contacts, maybe kayakers or debris, things that the bridge may not see. And 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be alone. Dolphins love to ride the bow. Cargo watch is going to be different from ship to ship, but it's most common on tankers. But we'll get more into that later. Maintenance. So all cargo ships are working ships, and there's always some kind of job that can be done out on deck. The deckhand has an endless amount of different jobs that he can do. There's always new things popping up. But let's just cover some of the most common jobs. And probably the most common job for the AB is fighting the never-ending battle against rust, which is chipping and painting. You find a nice big rust spot, knock out the rust, smooth out the surface, put primer, put paint. Just when you're finished, there's a new rust spot that pops up. Metal ships and salt water do not mix well. And of course, pressure washing or just rinsing off the deck. Then as far as preventative maintenance, probably the number one thing to do is grease. The ship has a million moving parts and everything takes grease. And kind of the same category is sloshing wires. The wires on the davits, cranes, and accommodation ladder all get used frequently and have to be properly lubricated. And probably my least favorite job, sanitary. Working ships constantly get dirty, and it's the deck's job to keep the ship as clean as possible. And if things get really bad, then we'll have to strip and wax the deck. Like I said earlier, there's a million different random jobs to be done on deck, but those are the most common. Steering, being on the helm. So a ship will go into hand steering usually if there's bad weather, a traffic situation, or if it's going down a shipping channel. Now when the AB is on the helm, he can pretty much only take two commands. The commanding officer can give you a rudder command, something like port 5, or shift the rudder to starboard 10, or midship, and just move the rudder accordingly. The other type of command that the helmsman can get is a heading, like steer 105, and the AB would hold that heading. Easy peasy. It is slightly nerve-wracking when you start to think that you're steering a gigantic ship down a very narrow passageway, but just try not to think about it. Keep your eye on the compass. Mooring operations. Mooring operations, in a nutshell, is just securing a ship to a dock, tying it up alongside. A very common thing for the deckhand. The whole evolution of mooring starts well before just tying the ship up. For the AB, the first job is rigging a pilot ladder and taking aboard a pilot. The pilot station will radio ahead of time and let us know what side of the ship to put the ladder and how high. Once the pilot's on board, the deck gang will split into two. Half will go forward and half will go aft. Next, each deck gang will take on a tug. Once the tugs are all fast, with the navigation of the pilot and assistance from the tugs, they'll move us alongside our berth. Once we get close enough, we'll throw out a heaving line and we'll start sending our mooring lines. We usually have a mooring plan before we tie up. This way we know what lines are going to go to what bollards. Once the lines are all fast, the last thing we do is set up the gangway. Pretty much the cherry on top. It depends on the pilotage, but from the all hands call to being all fast, mooring operations usually take about 2 hours. Cargo operations. So cargo operations are going to vary from ship to ship. The stevedores are usually the ones handling the cargo and operating the cranes. And the deck gang kind of takes care of everything else. Every type of vessel is going to have slightly different cargo operations, depending on the cargo. For example, on a bulk carrier, cargo operations can be opening and closing the hatches, sealing the hatches, dogging the hatches, and cleaning the cargo bays. And then on a ro-ro, cargo operations would be opening and closing the ramp, lowering and raising the decks, double checking the lashings, and tidying up the used ratchet straps. On a tanker, obviously cargo operations would be setting up the manifold, connecting, disconnecting the hoses, taking soundings of the cargo tanks, and opening and closing valves. And on container ships or general cargo ships, you're really just checking the turnbuckles, doing inventory of the twist locks and lashing gear, and opening the cargo holds. And one thing you'll have to do on every cargo ship is take soundings of the ballast tanks, especially during cargo operations. Crane operations. So even though the deckhands don't use the cranes for cargo, cranes play a vital part in ship operations. Ships are larger than life, and the gear they use is larger than life. So the deck gang relies on the cranes for a lot of heavy lifting. Whether you're operating the crane, using hand signals, or rigging something up, the deck gang uses the cranes all the time. A common thing we use the cranes for is something like stores, where we're bringing on ship supplies, and garbage, where we're taking off all the garbage. I have a whole video explaining crane operations, hand signals, and etiquette. Be sure to check it out. Marlin Spike Seamanship. Marlin Spike Seamanship is essentially the skill of handling line, and a very important ability to have for any deckhand worth his salt. It involves everything from your basic knots and hitches, faking line, splicing, whether that be small 3-strand line or all the way up to mooring line. Essentially, everything to do with handling line while you're on a ship. I also have a video all about knots and handling line. If you'd like to know more about line handling, be sure to check it out. So I guess the moral of the story would be, even though the AB is just the deckhand and doesn't have too much responsibility, he has a lot of things to learn. He wants to be a good AB, there's lots of things you have to be good at. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video. And a big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video and you'd like to support the channel, please consider liking, subscribing, or sharing the video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.